And also, if we could just see that if there are any questions or remarks, or if you can't hear me properly, just feel free to maybe write it down for us in the chat box, and we will get back to you on that. Okay, so welcome everyone. This is the session conducted by Pakistan Stock Exchange on weaving ESGs into the fabric of textile sector. One of the good things about this is that this is panning out to be a consortium where we can share each other's findings and learnings, and we can share our ability to train our fellow colleagues on most of this real-time market dynamics that we're now facing in textile sector. I think we're doing very well. We've taken a lot of work from India, and we're taking a lot from China as well. And I think this competitive edge is something that we should share between each other. As a country, we need to hopefully excel in this sector. As the COP26 concluded, one of the things that really came out as a very focused factor was how to interpret everyone in equally when it came to sustainability and their environmental and their social and their governance in it. We are all reporting and doing a lot of work, and it is in our silos, and at the moment we're getting away with a lot because the lack of standards or whatever we have endorsed is not something mandatory, it's voluntarily. So today I'm going to discuss primarily our 4 areas, which is ESGs and their benefits. Let's get an in-depth knowledge of what ESGs are. Some things on carbon emissions. I won't go into detail on carbon emissions and calculations. It's a whole different training, or it's a whole different session that one can conduct on. But we will generally just go through it. Then I do really want to expose you guys or introduce you guys to the science-based targets and the race to zero. And in the end, we're going to share a few initiatives that we have done, and I hope that we can benefit from those as well here at Tsuti. And primarily, the whole agenda is going to be focused or and around the textile sector. So moving on, we're going to take this a little fast because I think we're going to be short on time here. So Tsuti, just let me give you a very brief introduction to it. Tsuti Enterprises is a vertically integrated textile mill. We have our own spinning, weaving, and garment manufacturing units here in Karachi primarily. We have a huge presence in Korangi, Lanka, and Nooriabad, and we then have a huge plant which is completely run by women in Bangladesh as well. We have design offices in Turkey, Netherlands, Amsterdam, and US. We've also now got one in Bangladesh as well. We have a lot of certifications, which of course was where the primary motivation for reporting ESGs and complying with them or endorsing them started. I think everyone who's from the textile industry would relate to this. This is a huge regulatory requirement as well. Going forward, this is going to be as competitive as corporates, and as well as for country as a country, that we are as certified and as green competitively from everyone else as possible. As a responsible group, we are the market leaders for SDG 9 with Pakistan Business Council. So we would be having a lot of sessions through their unit SERB on sustainable and resilient infrastructures and inclusive industrialization, sustainable projects, and of course, innovation part. As a company, we have also pledged to being carbon neutral by 2050, which means we will be reducing our emissions by 30% by 2030, and then we'll go completely carbon neutral by 2050. Of course, we have our own CSR and compliance divisions, as most of you would also, who are working for this goal as their main KPI. Just a brief overview. This is a thought process, but it has rationale behind it. We want to make the entire value chain um, green, and for that we have our own sustainability loop that goes from responsible sourcing to responsible branding. Uh, in between is everything that is carried within our value chain, from manufacturing to resource efficiency, social compliance, ethical compliances, inclusivity, diversity, and everything we have as KPIs for ourselves as corporates inside. We will also share a brief overview of our science-based targets, and hopefully that would give you an idea of how these goals also merge into our science-based targets. So what is in ESG? So I think you all know, and sometimes I feel that there is a little bit of confusion. It's not environmental, social governance, environmental and social governance. It's environmental, social, and governance, which is governance in itself is a separate word here. And that is how we run our industries. Just a little bit of a difference here that I'd like to mention is that for SDGs, and everyone here, we've talked about how we are leading SDG 9 in Pakistan with Pakistan Business Council, but SDGs are primarily more in a broader spectrum and is something that our countries will be also endorsing and has more stakeholders to it, whereas ESGs are very much into the corporate sector. It is for us, for the manufacturing units and for the industries itself. So the focus is more towards the industry. So as SDGs represent your goals, which I'm sure you are endorsing way a lot of SDGs, some of the industries make that mistake by endorsing all of them. We in ESG are more focused on having it more limited and tailor-made for the industry itself. And there, of course, we have to then showcase your methods and processes. Okay, Irfan, I am sure the Pakistan Stock Exchange can share this presentation. It's a huge presentation, so it's like 75 slides, and I'll also be sharing a few materials that we got from Margaret, which who is an amazing ESG trainer, and she's just conducted a masterclass for us in January from South Africa. So we'll also share that material with you. A few things that I think we will now also look forward to as we go into discussing the SDGs and ESGs is that it's not just about having it, endorsing it, but it's about how transparent we are in the rationales of reporting it. We must be very aware of the risks that we're sitting on as textile conglomerates, as textile industries. One of the few things that we will always be looking for in this. What our focus is now for the next few years is primarily going to be on investments. And as we look into investments, I think one of the things that we also discussed in the conclusions of COP26 was that these have to be sustainable investments and how we can take benefits from it. We are doing a lot of work, but we as a country or as a sector are not projecting it as much as we should with the international market. That is where I think we must come together in ESG reporting, in our sustainability reports, and as a sector with the Pakistan Textile Council. I would really recommend that we start making use of these platforms. A lot of good work is also being done by Pakistan Environmental Trust. So there's a very good learning consortium with PET that you can also access free of cost. And the latest information on calculation of GHG emissions, their libraries, conversion libraries are available for your reference. So primarily, our wants is what is driving our ESG endorsements. Yes, we do want to be sustainable and green, but we don't want to lose our competitive edge. Now, being sustainable and green initially may not come with heavy investments, but going carbon neutral will in the end require really good heavy investments. For that, of course, we are also looking into green sourcing as our value chains, and scope 3, which we will discuss also in the coming slide, is going to be a huge problem for the textile industry. These are informal sectors. These are not within our area of influence, and this is where a lot of comparisons between us and the developed countries will come into focus. It is now inevitable that we do uh, go without bringing this scope 3 in our calculations. I think we're all very familiar with the Higgs index, but it still covers scope 1 and scope 2 primarily. One of the things I think that we would really now see is that our investments accordingly should look into value chains rather than just our manufacturing units. And that is going to be a game changer for the textile industry while endorsing ESGs. So I've seen a lot of us doing very good work when it comes to wind energies and energy saving initiatives or green energy initiatives, which I think is an amazing thing to do. But remember, when we will be going for carbon neutrality, we would not be able to go for offsets very early on. So that's one of the mistakes that we have all been making. We've invested huge in these wind energy units or in these solar energy units, but offsets would be coming much later. We would be needing more reduction of the emissions rather than offsets at this stage, and offsets may come in the last 10 years. Just to give you an example, what we've done is that our 50 megawatt plant, we have started claiming carbon credits for it. So for the next 10 years, it is booked under the GCC standard of voluntary market, and we will be claiming credits for it. We won't be able to offset anything against it. But after that, we might. So after 2030, we might look into offsetting a few things, but right now we'll only be focused on reducing our emissions. I just wanted to have this slide in because I thought this is very important because most of us do not take water consumption in our GHG emissions, or we take it separately in our ESG reporting, which either way is a good thing as long as it's being covered one way or the other. But wet process in textiles is a huge, huge issue and is something that even the Western part of our customers or our industries are also looking into. A lot of innovation is going into it. I'll share some of the investments we have done on it. But just let me also suggest that water can be part of your GHG calculations as well as your separately reported in your ESGs. But this alone can bring a huge saving as well as reduction in the greenhouse emissions, as you can see in point number 4. And it is one of the primary concerns for environmentalists in the textile sector. This is where your hazardous discharge of chemicals on your effluents go, and this is one of the primary consumer of groundwater in the sectors that we're going to see. So it's paper and board and then textiles. So a lot of focus needs to be given to this, and this is where we've been working a lot. Now, of course, with recycling plants, you can have positive water usage, which means that your water is actually going to be recycled more than once, and then you can claim to be positive on water consumption rather than consuming fresh water again and again. We'll discuss this further as we move on. One of the things that we would also like to mention here with ESGs is that ESGs is very inclusive in its thought process and decision making. So stakeholder engagement is one of the prerequisites for this. This will help you out. So make sure that when we have a strategic action plan, the worker level is also included in it. You will get some of the best solutions from them. And then, of course, so on as you go up, you would have a macro version of the solutions. But this should include everyone in. You can have various programs like TPM, from productivity enhancements teams to quality improvement teams within the floor sector of your company, and that is where you're going to get the best ideas and strategies for your ESGs and their compliance. Just a little bit of how apparel companies are shifting their focus from success by ESG leadership. So you can see some of the work they're doing in the environmental side. Again, water being the most. One thing that I think we have also seen as a gap in our HITS index and in our reporting of GHG calculations is that SSRs are not being compensated. So everyone who is recycling their waste or making environmental disposal or reusing it, that needs to be subtracted from your footprint in your scope 1 calculations. And I think that will help you out. Over to social, a lot of work has been done, is being done, but I think the social part should also go beyond the boundaries of your company and can be at the initial levels when it comes to women empowerment at school, colleges, at academic levels, at sport levels, where we can help the country make women more inclusive and prominent in the mainframe of the country and corporate sector. Governance is going to be something very tricky. You will have a lot of data here, but I think EU has now given us a little bit of a leverage by making us non-financial reporters on ESGs when there's a certain level of employment within the sector, and textile is hugely manpower. So we kind of sideline this here. So the financial part is not very huge now for ESG reporting for the textile sectors, but yes, everything else is, CSR is, your foundation work is, and that now is also being translated into GHG calculations as well. You can actually gain points from your CSR work on GHG calculations. I think one of the main topics of today was why we need it. So other than these regulatory issues and all of the needs that we have right now in the market and how we need to project ourselves as a textile sector of Pakistan, it is, you know, one of the main requirements for ourselves as well. It's not going to just be something for our stakeholders, but we will get benefits directly from it, especially when it comes to value chains and good manufacturing practices. The more transparent we are, the more easier it is for us to report our ESGs, and specifically when it comes to making an exception or changing our targets or base years is where transparency would play an important role. So I'm not going to dwell a lot of time here, but it's just that I want to show that a lot of our customers are keen on it. So that it should be a prime motivator on going for ESG reporting and ESG compliance, whether it's H&M, Inditex, a lot of these big conglomerates are looking into reporting this, and we become their scope 3. So this is something inevitable. We will be facing ESG reporting in the future. As I said, COP26 has made sure that we are part of this. The textile sector is part of it. The New York Stock Exchange has also issued their own standards. EU has issued their own standards. I'll just briefly take you through a few markets and then what we are doing. So our main customers that we look forward to in exports are Europe and European Union countries. And they're even planning on seeing a taxonomy charge on whatever that comes in Europe. And if it's not green or properly transparent and reported, gets more tax on it. So for our competitive edge, this is going to be even more important for us to do so. The EU Green Deal is also going to be very important in the future. We will have to look for better sourced materials which are greener. So organic cotton, recycled technologies are going to play a huge role in the future. And this is where our investments need to be now. So similarly, USA has their own standards, China has their own standards. So everyone who's looking for a market, the reason I'm just showing these slides is because you need to be aware that all of these countries are coming up with them. Even the US themselves are not very ethical when it comes to green compliance, but they make sure that their scope 3 is. Similarly, Egypt, countries like Egypt, and Egypt is very famous for its cotton, is going to have the same impact. They have their own standards coming up, and they're quite stringent, and they are very keen on having transparent reporting on ESG performances and SDGs. Similarly, you can see Indonesia, huge pulp, manufacturer coming up with their own. But the good thing is that Pakistan at the moment has a few frameworks in pipelines, and the Securities and Exchange Commission of Pakistan did issue a corporate social responsibility order in 2009. However, it isn't very, very difficult. It's not very specific. I think more of the regulatory compliances that we've signed on to are much more detailed and they're much more stringent. And that is a blessing in disguise at this moment, because we would be able to get away with not only just complying with our national laws, but also with our regulatory authorities. Similarly, Saudi, Middle East, everyone who's looking into those markets will have the same thing. Sri Lanka has their own standards coming up, and these are countries that are working on it. So it's not going to be very far off that Pakistan, with its history, copies one of these standards and also makes it a law for us. So it's going to happen soon, and I think that is one of the, again, prime motivators for us to get on it early as possible and have our say in this legislation as well. So what we have now is a few frameworks that are leading ESGs. The Carbon Disclosure Project that Tsuti itself is working largely on right now. Climate disclosure standards, global reporting initiatives, they are now all integrated into ISSB. And ESG has one of the best frameworks with ISSB. So I would share these standards with PSX, and hopefully they can share them with the participants. They are some amazing read and not very long, just 11 pages. I go through them and you'll get a very good clarity on the ins and outs of ESG reporting, transparency, and compliances. These were, again, as I said, the sources: Margaret Thomas, who is South African and UK head of ESG standard reporting. And she conducted this masterclass in January for international students, and it was really good. I'll share that material with you as well. But I think now we should all, we've gone through GRI and everything. GRI and ISSB standards are more or less the same, just a little more evolved, and actually ISSB gives you more leverage on financial reporting. So let's focus on ISSB as the future. That is my recommendation, not something that I would say is a written rule. We at the moment have been reporting on the GRI standard for the last 3 years, but we would want to go on to ISSB's version now. Yes, so benefits, not only just for your stakeholder and regulatory and market competitive edge, but yeah, it increases a lot of more things. You'll all be on the same page. You will know where to invest in better. You would have leaner processes. You would have better environmental and social benefits from it. Your companies will have good production rates and TPM or OEE benefits from this as well. So it has huge benefits, not just for reporting purposes and for customers and for marketing purposes. It actually will give you financial and process efficiencies as well. So the future will hold you to all of these issues, and I hope that we just are not taking this as one of the regulatory compliances. This is going to be after the COP26. Yeah, this is going to be huge for us. Let's get on it as early as we can. And I applaud Pakistan Stock Exchange, Raita and her team for setting this up. And this information platform can be really good for us to share what we're doing on it. And if anyone needs any more assistance, we can be there to help each other out. In the end, it should be the sector for the country that grows. Just as part of the agenda, I'm going to take you through GHG calculations. I hope you know what GHG calculations are. It is greenhouse gases. I would really want you to say that, GHG sinks are what we have already right now at this moment exhausted. So we need more sinks. That means we need more trees. We need more landfills which are properly made. We need more cleaner seas, cleaner waters, because these things are the best. But of course, offset initiatives do not lose their importance, as countries like Pakistan and all of these developing countries will be giving a target for their carbon neutrality, and which would mean that they would be buying or they would be offsetting a lot from their own projects inside the country. And this is why we believe that in about a few years, all of our initiatives or our carbon credits will go through the ministries first. And if they are exhausted with their neutrality, then we would be able to sell them in the voluntary markets or in the compliance markets. So yeah, the carbon credit or carbon offset projects are also, don't lose their importance, but we should really need to focus for the first 10 years by 2030 on how we can reduce our emissions. Just for your knowledge, with ESGs, one of the good things is, sorry, Salah, did I skip a slide? Let me just, okay, so that was just the definitions of ESGs that I skipped. I'll just tell you what greenhouse gas emissions are. These are the emissions you make that actually result in depleting your systems, your ozone, and these emissions are generally translated into CO2 emissions. They are also other areas of methane and everything else that the conversions are, but this is going to come as we go forward as well. So I'll tell you those conversion factors as well. But these are emissions that really harm your environment, and we would really like to reduce these and this footprint that we have because of our industries. So that's the slide. I'm sorry, I skipped because we have about 70 slides and I really want to finish this in the next 20 minutes. So just quickly, materiality is everything that is important to your GHG inputs, and make sure your materiality matrix is very well made. This is where your transparency is going to come in. And if you want to change your base year or your targets and give an explanation, then this is where materiality matrix play a huge part. So just remember, do not skip anything. It's okay. No one's going to be very regulatory or policing about it, but this is how it happens. Materiality metrics are generally where people try to omit things which they shouldn't. Double shouldering is something that I would also want to discuss right now. It's either you call it double counting or double shouldering, is where you are already compensating for your emissions, but someone else is also doing that. So one of the things that now our customers and you, all the textile people would again relate to this, is that they've taken us into scope 3 and given us targets to go for carbon neutral. This is what is the best strategy for scope 3, because we would not be able to take on their emissions and mitigate them. So the best way to do it for formal sector primarily is that you give them targets for carbon neutrality and they take those emissions away from the products that they're giving to you. Another way is also that you invest in their portfolios. But remember, when you are looking into the value chain of your emissions, you have to use the same calculator. And this is, I know, a huge point of contention that we have now, all the customers with their own calculators coming in, and you're like, why can't they just have one? Unfortunately, the standard says when you're calculating your footprint, it should be calculated the same way all across. So they have to give us their calculator, or they ask us for the data, because they have to put it in their calculator. So the calculator has to remain same, whatever methodology you choose, it has to remain same throughout the value chain. So that is why the textile sector would be seeing a lot of calculators coming in, and different models from each customer on how to calculate their emissions. A four-tier approach for your emissions, of course, do mention your scope. As you go with the CTP standards compliance markets, now they do want you to cover your scope 3, because it's one of the largest. It's approximately 4 times combined scope 1, 2. So you would need to define your boundary. Now, why we say you define your boundary is, if you're going from cradle to gate or gate to gate, the concept is that the other emissions or the footprint is being compensated by someone else, and that is something you have to prove. For example, for our customers, they are showing that they've given us, as the scope 3 people, targets of carbon neutrality. So we will be compensating for our own footprint, and I know the jeans that we make and being bought by our customers, they won't take our footprint with it. We would have to go carbon neutral for them. So that is why, because their scope is now more towards gate to grave, because they are more on the consumer side. So it's very important that a very well thought and doable boundary is set, and you make sure that you know what percentage of formal and informal sector is present, where you would be able to delegate those targets of neutrality, and where you'll have to take them on as your own footprint. Make sure you're adhering to a standard. As I recommended, ISSB is the best right now. It compensates for everything. It is better than GRI, but that's just my humble opinion. Go for it. Go through your scopes, and then come up with a standard on which you're going to base your GHG calculations on. Include scope 1, 2, 3, and when you're setting your targets, make sure your targets are compensating for your future growths, expansions, investments, and everything as part of it while you're reporting the base year. I won't go into these details. Again, this is just to make sure that you identify your sources, your sinks, your reservoirs. When you are doing this, that means when you're calculating, make sure that you do take out everything that you've reused, your waste that you've disposed of, environmental friendly manner, or your recycled material. So make sure your calculations takes those footprints out. Generally, we're just seeing a lot of emissions being reported, but we do not see the amount of waste that should be subtracted from it, or was reused or recycled. And if it's not, then of course you take that as a footprint as well. Quickly, yeah, you need to have your control, your equity share, and your consolidation in check. So you would take scope 1 in areas where you have good control and equity share within that facility. So that's primarily a thumb rule again, that scope 1 emissions are everything that are directly or within the boundary, and that is because you have full control over them and everything. Scope 2 are generally your energy that you've brought in, which is generally WAPDA, K electric, and everything like that. Scope 3 is your value chain, but there is sometimes a problem when you're deciding in scope 3 and scope 1, contracted, outsourced, leased in units or bodies that you have within your operational value chain. Just make sure that if you have good control over it, or a good equity share in it, and by equity share, I just don't mean shareholder in it, but the part where you would also see that the contractor or the third party is only working for you, and your financial impact is huge for them. So if you say no to them that you're not going to work with them and you take that financially out, then they do become part of your at times scope 1 or scope 3, from scope 3 to scope 1, sorry. And that's a good example would be like, our transport person for bringing people from their homes to the factories is only working for us. It's a third party contractor, but he's we have huge financial involvement with them, so we can take them into scope 1. I think the future now holds that these scope boundaries are going to be very blurred as long as we take the entire value chain as part of our GHG emissions. As I said, your direct emissions would be scope 1, whatever you've bought in terms of energy to be used inside your production or operational boundaries is scope 2, and scope 3 would be more value chain outside the factory with lesser influence, lesser control, and lesser ability to make targets on. That becomes more or less scope 3. I think one of the difference you'd also see in scope 3 while deciding what is scope 3 and scope 1 is scope 3 would always be a body where you can delegate targets. Scope 1 is always going to be you yourself. So scope 3 entities should be where you can look into also as things where you can delegate that you make this go carbon neutral. I'm not going to take this footprint, so you have to go carbon neutral and provide us with a carbon neutral product or a service. And that can be bodies that can be taken into scope 3, whereas scope 1 bodies can never be delegated out to. They would always be your targets primarily. So that's just one more thing that when people are deciding what to go take in scope 1 or scope 3 can look into. Again, make sure your collection data is very secure. You have stationary, mobile, process emissions, and fugitive emissions. I know fugitive emissions have very less impact, but if they're hugely toxic, do take them in consideration. You can be conservative, but you, because the standards actually ask you to be conservative, but make sure that a broader spectrum is much better in terms of reduction of GHG in the coming years. If you're very conservative in the beginning, in your base years, it's more difficult to show progress in the coming years. Okay, I think we've discussed this. I would like to mention this blue, something that we've written in blue here. This is from the SVT Standards from CDP. And, this is the only standard that sort of gives you a written definition of what you must cover at least. You won't find this in other standards, but scope 3 shall cover a minimum of 70% of value chain in terms of emissions, provided it is more than 40% of scope 1 and 2 combined. So that is something that they always say. And then again, 95% for scope 1 and 2 is your minimum requirement. How do you calculate wastewater fugitive emissions from wastewater treatment plant? So it's for me right now, how we're doing it for Heen is that we have conversion factors for the model that we've taken from the Italian company on this. You do have meters, gas meters, that you can also make this more concise, but fugitive emissions are very difficult to detect. So you would find that with your vendors primarily, or on the fugitive emissions that happen with this model or this process of effluent treatment. We are taking the Italian Igelio conversion factors for fugitive emissions, though they're not huge, but yeah, I think that's the best source for doing it, because we won't be spending a lot of time on calculating it. And I think with the recent incident, one of the bigger industries in textile, we did have, while cleaning, you would also see during your maintenance activities, you can get your LED meters to detect a lot of emissions too. So that is one way of doing it as well. But I would recommend just go for your book values with your vendors. Okay, so collection of data, and then of course calculators. I would always recommend conversion factors to be coming from a source which is well recognized, whether it's UN, WWF, or the governments themselves. I would give you these lists. I think Pakistan Stock Exchange can share this. It's an amazing list, exhaustive list of all the conversion libraries, but you will also find them on PET Sport platform as well, and you can see what they are doing. I would also quickly want to talk about the base year, setting up of a base year. Remember, we are much focused on setting up a base year which has the maximum energy and water consumptions, and then you can take targets around it. For me, I think a thumb rule is to calculate your base year from OEE, which is overall equipment effectiveness, which is a multiplied factor of performance, efficiency, and availability. Sorry, performance, quality, and availability of your equipment. If this is more than 75%, take that as a base year, or as large as OEE is, that should be your base year. It would mean that this is how you would be producing in the future. So just for your reference, it's a thumb rule. Take base years, not just based on your energies or your exceptional performances, but on OEE, because monetary exceptional performances, variant exceptional productions, these are going to vary with the type of orders you get. OEE is going to be an amazing factor for you to determine the base year. For all of those who don't know OEE, just let me know and I'll share some material with you. It's an amazing tool to calculate your overall equipment efficiencies in the mail or in the corporates. These are some of the conversion libraries. I'll give you details of them and you'll find them on the PET consortium as well. So just to let you know, something that is of base. You've recently also had yesterday, I think IPCC gave out its report. It's a good report to read, 300 and something pages, but I mean, you just go through the ones that are more important for you. Calculators, there are a lot of calculators online. For the textile sectors, just like to tell you that Tsuti has joined hand with IPA Pakistan in Karachi to create its textile value chain calculator, and we hope to get it also endorsed by CDP. We've sent version 1 for verification. We've got comments on it back. So we're now in the process of making version 2, and hopefully if we get that done, you guys would have that available for your use as well. But then there are a lot of other tools online that you can also access. I would recommend the IFCC tool. This is the World Bank's tool for calculating footprint, but these are generally scope 1 and 2, not scope 3. Quickly, warming potentials. These are, how you can sort of see your CO2 into other factors. So this is your global warming potentials, but yeah, we'll be most probably in the future sticking to CO2 equivalents. That's how our customers are reacting. That's how the world is reacting. But it's nevertheless, just there for your reference. I'll just quickly go through SBTs. These are called science-based targets, and these are targets made for you to comply with the fact that we can limit our warming to 1.5 degrees. How we can do that? That means how you need to go carbon neutral by a certain time frame to contribute your part into limiting the global warming potential to 2 degrees or less. For this science-based targets, the only thing that I would now delve into, because we're really short on time, is that we would really suggest that you guys have a carbon budget, an emission scenario, and an allocation approach on how you're going to go for it. Remember, all science-based targets must, in the first year, incorporate the fact that you will be expanding or reducing or changing a market operational dynamic in the future. So these targets are not just for the year, but taking in account the future changes that you allocate. For example, even in future, as yesterday IPCC was very clear that all coal units need to shut down. So your consumptions and everything like that now has to have a target on how you can phase out all coal-related fuel from it. So, and you would not have gas, so there's going to be a huge debate on thermal efficiencies or biomass plants And that's going to come with their own scope 3 emissions, especially the biomass thing. So I'm just hoping that your targets that you set, so science-based targets, Riaz, are generally targets that you set for carbon GHG emission reduction. And these reductions have to be in line with the fact that you need to go to 1.5 degrees centigrade rise in the global warming potential by 2050. This is something that we need for Earth to have irreversible effects being taken out of the equation when we're looking into future global warming potentials. That means that you sort of then also endorse the fact that you're going to go carbon neutral, and you are going to also make sure that all your emissions are compensated for by a certain target date. Now, I know we would really want it to be 2050 or before 2050, but as you can see, India has given a later date. Pakistan will also be giving a latter time frame because of our developing status. But science-based targets are generally, yes, they are rightly pointed out by Fahim, aligned with the Paris Agreement. They are completely aligned with that. And they would ask you to make sure you have a date and a time slot for your GHG emissions. And these are your operational, right? So for your company that we're talking about. And they would want you to go carbon neutral by a certain target date. So those targets are then long term. So your science-based targets are primarily based after you've done your GHG calculation, because that is the time when you know which areas are contributing the most and where you have to make compensatory actions to reduce those emissions. There would be areas where you won't be able to make any further investments, or the investments would be very impractical. So that is where then offsets come in, and you can buy carbon credits to compensate for your GHG footprint. So I won't be able to go into more detail with this, but I'm going to send you a note on this in the chat box. It's the good SVT standard, the only standard which is very detailed on calculations and target setting. If you get this presentation, it has a very detailed way of how you can make these targets, whether it's scope 1, 2, 3, and you have to make targets within all 3 of your scopes. So this is just one of it. How you can recalculate, how you can offset. Recalculate is going to be something that you have over the years. If you have an operational divergence, then you can recalculate those targets as well, and how you do it. So again, offset is something I recommend in the latter years of your GHG neutrality, but this will also be part of your standard. Abdul, we'll make sure that we do share this presentation. It's a longer presentation, so you'll most probably get a link to it. But yes, it's a 75 slide presentation. It's a masterclass for it, but we will make sure you get this. Water and energy initiatives, some of the things for the textile sector, you guys are all doing, stewardship programs with WWF to reduce water, something that also reduces your footprint greatly. And the ESG water compliance, it's something that is huge right now within the world, especially with one pair of, for us, denim, we're primary denim manufacturers. So it's a huge thing on how we're dealing with our water consumptions per pair of jeans. And there's an international benchmark for it, and that's how we work with the WWF under this program. I'll just give you, then there are green office certifications that you can do to make sure your footprint is going down. The fact why you do it is that it gets endorsed by someone. And as I said, your conversion libraries must be from a reputable organization in a valid time frame, and it should be more related to your country. So this WWF has a huge stake that they've given in on the GHG calculations, and you can make use of it too. We have had some really good experiences with them. So yeah, we've worked with them on mangrove plantation as well. This is green office certification, though less in footprint, but it does help in the overall planning of it. So that is how we led to the LEED certified plants as well. Some of the water initiatives that we've been doing. Our next target, of course, is to achieve water platinum certification in Alliance for Water Stewardship through WWF. But at the moment, these are some of our consumptions, and Levi's for a certain pair of jeans is at 24, and we hope to be there sometime. But for our heavier patterns and for our overall consumption, 38 is going to be our benchmark, which is going to be amazing, hopefully. But we will go for 30% by the end of 2022, because we just installed water recycling plants on 2 of our facilities, one in denim, which is weaving, and then one in our garment. So the whole life cycle sort of then trickles down, and if we do this, we would most probably go into positive water consumption as well. Something that we have now, I know this would look like something that we're just boasting for Tsuti, but we would just like to mention that we are now on the Zero Discharge of Hazardous Chemicals contributor platform, on the board of it, the only organization here. So this would help us to further mitigate policies for Pakistan specifically and for the textile sector. We had already gotten its certification, this gold certification, much earlier on. We were again one of the first ones, but now we're part of their board as well. So your suggestions or any problems you're facing within especially the MRSL lists, which you have to be on to get this certification, just let us know, and we can take those up with the consortium at a contributorship level. Some of the initiatives, as we discussed, for the textile sector, specifically on water and energy reduction, and ultimately resulting in lesser GHG emissions. The wet section is now much more in focus. We're trying to make use of ozone technologies, drier applications rather than wetter applications to get the same quality results or the same embellishments on your jeans. And this will help us to not only reduce water, but also make our processes more efficient. We would want to also phase out completely the pumice stone technology and its work, so that should help as well. G2 ozone method makes sure that it's like the washing machines you have now at home as well, where it's more water bubbles that do the work, air bubbles that do the work, rather than just lots and lots of washing. Re-washing is something that we also want to take out of the equation, but this can only happen if you have a very good process of calculating how each process contributes to your GHG emissions. And I think that is going to happen when you do your calculator, or you assemble your calculator. Then again, there are certain more blue cloud technologies, smart foam technologies. These are chemical cleaning processes or chemical bleaching processes rather than using more water. And this is much more reusable, but this is also in the MRSL list. So these are not hazardous or toxic chemicals in use. They're a little more expensive though. So we won't see a lot of people going 100% on it. But yeah, they're out there and they're still working on it, and we can hopefully get on board with it. Again, Effluent Technologies, just one thing that I'd really like to quickly say, please make sure that if you're treating your effluent, don't throw it into the Gati mainstream or into these drains which have a lot of other effluents in it. Make sure you use that water either by recycling, or if you have it under control, then in irrigation. We really need this water back, or it's been taken back into the loop, but doesn't go into these highly toxic, non-processed water drains. So that is something that we also look forward to. Tsuti, of course, has now got its recycling plant, which will enable us to reuse most of our water back into the process, and hopefully we can go into positive displacement of water. Just for your reference, this is how we installed the latest recycling plant. I thought I'd put this in so you guys would have some advantage of doing this. Specifically, just go online, have a look at them. They're one of the largest, one of the most reputed people in working on water projects. And yeah, this will enable us to get 80% recycled water and at a better TDS, for Karachi at least. It will be much better than your groundwater. So I know it's a huge, expensive project, but then this is where your future investments can aim at. This is going to be huge for you guys, not only just as an investment for green energy, but the fact that the availability of a resource would be easier for you. It would be much more easier for you to do this. Does this fall under ZLD? Yes, it can. You can make it part of that as well. It can be in under various initiatives, in ESG reporting initiatives of water consumptions. It can be in zero hazardous discharge, because this enables us to even take the reject from the RO back into the equalization tanks, because RO rejects are generally one of the most difficult things to reprocess. But this can be marketed under various things, so you can definitely have them in various we've used for it for WWF as well as for our ESG reporting, as well as for our regulatory compliances as well. So this would most probably take a lot of consumption per jeans down as well, so the footprint goes down as well. Just for your information, this isn't a very huge plant. You can now get vertical plants as well. So for Karachiites who have problem with lands, just for your reference, you can get vertical plants as well. I can maybe take a liberty to say that anyone who wants to visit us and look at this working is more than welcome as well. Just let me know in detail and I'll get my director on board with it as well. But do make sure that you can visit us anytime and look at all these initiatives in action. So thank you, everyone. I'm sorry I took a little bit more of the time that was allotted, but we had a lot to cover. We have good lead infrastructures in place. Lead infrastructures enable you to make everything at the source in terms of reduction. A lot of work went into it. It's something that you get certified on, even from the material of construction, the way the use of it. You can just see some of the results that we've had in terms of lighting use, in terms of your energy inputs from our conventional units to our LEED certified units. So it does actually work, and this is now paying us back, not only in terms of marketing us as green, but literally paying us back in our operations as well. Some of the systems which I think you all would be also doing, but it's very essential that you look into energy audits and see that nothing is being released without taking all the energy away from it. I think that's one of the ways, let me put it that way. And then of course your VFDs, bus bars, auto sensors, a lot of this is going there. As you do your GHG calculations, a lot of things will come in. Guys, I'm just gonna quickly do this because this is the last few slides, and then I'll answer all these questions for you. So just make sure that your mass balance is there. If you can compensate for every single liter of water, then you have a very transparent calculation. And if you can't, then your GHG emissions would always give you trouble. And so, a lot of this more lean manufacturing initiatives, technological initiatives, which I think small industries, it would be difficult for them to do, but they can combine those efforts with other smaller industries, joint, ETPs or joint processes. That is going to be really helpful in the future, as well as a sector, as a country, that we should look into. Consortiums like Pakistan Stock Exchange, PET, are also working on that. As I said, we've invested in renewable energy. We are now claiming carbon credits for it. Hopefully, before the country comes up with their deadlines and stops us from selling them, we're selling it into voluntary markets right now and gaining enough money from it. So please do that. That's very important. India earned a lot of money from it. We as a country are investing a lot in Jimpi and in these valleys, which are high wind valleys. So let's make carbon credits, claim them for it. And they're very, very good. They're very lucrative. So, I mean, coming from first-hand experience, it's not very difficult and it's very lucrative. And then we have invested in solar, but again, this was something that we give to the grid. So it's not directly reducing at the moment. It is just compensating for an offset. So something that we can also look into. For Karachi, we have land issues, but that's why, of the 19 projects, we would be able to come up with almost 7.1 megawatts of total solar energy. But yeah, something to look forward to when it comes to offsetting our GHG emissions. So thank you, and I don't know how we're doing on time, but if I can answer them later as well. But let me just quickly go through what you guys said. How do you treat the sludge? Do you send it to incineration? No, we do not send our sludge to incineration at this moment. We have eco-waste who is composting it. Certain amount of it is going into a landfill. And yes, we're taking a hit for it. But composting is better. Also, in the middle of composting, they decided to make it into a fuel, into RDF, because they thought the calorific values of cotton part in our sludge or the zero fiber was better. So multiple things being done, but yeah, let me not be very diplomatic on this, but yeah, a huge portion lands in the landfill right now. What is a suitable solution for RO reject with very high TDS? I mean, recycling plants allow you to sort of dilute the issue for some time. So you can take the RO reject back into the equalization tanks. They're very less in volume, but they're very high in your toxicity or TDS and everything. So recycling plants do allow you to sort of dilute the issue much more. And then you can take it back into the equalization tank and then rework it. I would just recommend go into the Italian guy that we've referenced. They have this even on their website for this. Will this recording be available on PSX website after the session? I would really hope the PSX people could reply to that, but I think they would be having it online. Kindly share the presentation via email, G Hafiza. We will send it to all the participants. If there are any further questions, and there's going to be a package that I'll send your way. It's not going to be huge read, so don't just be intimidated by the amount of files that come your way, but it's just 3 or 4 files, but really important files. And I think if you read them, this will give you a very good edge over starting with your ESGs and ESGs reporting. So if there aren't any further questions, and we've taken 10 minutes over, so I just apologize for that delay, but thank you so much for joining in and for these amazing questions and for being this interactive. If you have any further questions, hopefully Raida and her team can share our emails, and you're more than welcome to visit us. You can more than welcome to share your questions with us, and let's work together for it. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the comments as well. Thank you. Bye.